with the Florida Diagnostic Learning and Research System. I am part of the administrative office. So there are 19 centers all over the state, and you have a local one that covers you. And then you also have our 2 specialized centers and our 6 multidisciplinary university centers. But I'm at the administrative office. That kind of is the directive head of all of the Fiddler centers. We kind of help to coordinate all of the projects together. I'm a virtual learning coordinator, which means I focus a lot on virtual instruction, virtual professional development. I also do some in-person things, and I am a co-lead for our technology specialists. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me after this presentation, and I can always get you in touch with your local center for support, or if you had questions about something that I spoke about, we can make sure that we get you the right level of support that you would need to implement it in the classroom. A little background on myself. I've kind of been that vagabond teacher. I have taught in Polk County as well as Osceola County. I've been a self-contained teacher. I've done resource. I've done co-teach. Most of your models of special education support services are something that I've done in my career. I've also taught English as a second language abroad. I've worked in a university Fiddler Center as well as an associate center, and then now at the admin office. So I kind of am a jack of all trades, but I'm very passionate about the use of technology to help students with disabilities be able to reach their true potential, and technology really does help that. So our session objective is so that you walk away today being able to identify and describe at least 5 tools or strategies for providing accommodations in a virtual learning environment. Very hopefully attainable goal with our 2 hours together. So in the chat pod right now, I'm asking you to write any questions that you would like answered about the content or about that goal. Do you have a particular student in mind? Do you have a particular accommodation type in mind? I'm going to give you some processing time, and go ahead and type in the chat. Ooh, Stephanie, that's a good one. Accommodations for students who have printed work. So you're thinking for our distance students who are not joining us virtually. I got some ideas for you. Absolutely. Strategies in general to share with virtual teachers. At the end of the session, I will give you a copy of the PowerPoint. So if you want to share this with anyone at your building, please feel free to do that. I'll also direct you to the recordings that we did of this training back in March when we first all got sent home. And it's nice and a succinct recording for it. Also, orally read aloud test questions. Ooh, I got lots of ideas on that one. You'll see that we'll talk about specific accommodations today, but I'll give you multiple ways of trying to address that particular accommodation in a virtual environment. And the reason I give you multiple ways is, one, your IT department might have blocked it, and that happens. We understand that. And sometimes there's no moving them. That's okay. And then there are other times that maybe the student's technology doesn't work appropriately, or the student dislikes the technology or refuses to do it. Small group testing for remote multiple students up to 11. Now, Angela, that's not something we're necessarily going to directly address today, but please remind me at the end of the session so we could talk about some different ways to use the technology that you have available to you in your district. Excellent. Thank you so much for participating. Great conversation. All right, so as we go through, I do not want to waste your time on things that you're aware of. This way I can kind of get a feel of what you know about. So if you've heard of it, I want you to type in the chat pod a little penguin. So underneath the type a new message, there's a little emoji button. So let's try it out. So click on the emoji button and type penguin. You will automatically get a penguin to put in. So if you type in penguin, it means that you've heard of it. Let's practice. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Christy. It means let's see some penguins light up this chat board. That works too, Andrea. Andrea, you can also just click on the emoji and then type in penguin and you'll get a penguin to pop up. But you got to hit that emoji button first underneath the message. And then, thank you, Rhonda. And then if you have not heard of it before, let's give it a polar bear. So same thing. You don't see the emoji button. Uh-oh. That's okay. You can just give me a sad face then. If you can't find the emoji button for our penguins, it'll be a smiley face instead. And for the polar bear, it'll be a sad instead. Thanks, Jake. I like the polar bear because she's holding her cubs and it's just really cute. And then, of course, if it's a tool that you've used before, I ask that you share in the chat pod about your thoughts and experiences with that particular tool. All right, so before we get into all the fun stuff, we've got to get the housekeeping out of the way. Who can receive accommodations? There are two groups of students who can receive accommodations. Those are students with an IEP and students with a 504 plan. Now, of course, if you're teaching in a virtual setting and a student is struggling, you can always provide supports using these tools and strategies and just document that you're using them. And then, of course, then they wouldn't be allowable for testing accommodations because only testing accommodations are allowable for students with an IEP or a 504 plan. But you can always use an accommodation for all of our other students as a way of teaching them the content. It's a form of scaffolding. And what exactly is an accommodation? An accommodation is going to be changes that are made in how the student accesses information and demonstrates performance. It's only a change in the how. When you start modifying what the student is expected to learn, that's when you're going to get a modification. And a modification is only for our students who are on access points, who have significant cognitive disabilities. Okay, so I just want to make sure that we have our terminology together before we really get deep into the content. All accommodations should be based on the effect of the disability. So we're going to talk about some of your high flyer accommodations that we see often because they are effects of the disability that happen often. But if you're looking to provide a new accommodation for a student, always make sure that you're looking at the effect of the disability rather than just kind of a laundry list of what's been available in the past. In the accommodations manual, they have an Appendix B. That's a great place to look at the effect of the disability. And then on the other side of the chart, it will give you different strategies that you can use to support a student who has that particular effect of the disability. And I'll make sure that that is also sent out with the PowerPoint at the end. All right, so in the chat pod, let me know. You can also raise your hand if you want to jump on the mic. I absolutely encourage that if you feel comfortable. What are some accommodations that are currently needed by your students? So, and if you want to raise your hand, you just look for the little hand icon. If you're in the desktop version, it is up above the meeting chat. And I'm not 100% sure of where it is, the web-based version. All right, read aloud, extra time. Scaffolded notes, small group. Printed material. Questions presented orally. Okay. Any others? There's one that I really love to talk about when it comes to virtual learning, and I'm going to wonder if anybody's going to say it. Rephrasing, absolutely. Excellent idea, Angela. That's one that comes up a lot. Okay, printed material from a fully virtual course. That's a new one, Christy, but I would imagine that that is something that you get requested for quite a bit. All right, so it seems the chat's kind of calmed down, and I'm going to share with you what's my personal favorite to talk about is preferential seating in a virtual environment. And the reason I say that is because in the classroom, obviously it means different things for different students, but in a virtual setting, it could really mean a lot as well. It could be having the camera on or having the camera off, making sure that you can always see that student in your grid view, that you have them highlighted or pinned in whatever video chat you're using, so that you can make sure that if they need a prompt or they need to be redirected, you can see them right away. If it has something to do with their home and something that translates into their home environment, maybe they're in the front of your class because they need to be up closer. Well, in the home environment, we really want to make sure that the screen's an appropriate size and that they have that right kind of space without anything that's going to distract them behind the monitor. So like I said, that's just one of my favorite things to talk about with preferential learning, preferential seating. I have to say you guys are probably being really nice to me, because there's always somebody when I do a bigger version of this training that always brings that one up because they think they're going to stump me. All right, so just a reminder, now, if you don't have if you're using the web-based version, you could just do a smiley face or a sad face. So give me a penguin if you've heard of the tool, and then a polar bear if you have not. So, okay, on the next tools we're going to talk about. Get to the fun part. All right, oral presentation. This is something that comes up a lot. This is why I like to talk about it first. The majority of the equipment that your students are using at home are going to have the ability to have text-to-speech built in. Anything made within the last 3 years has accessibility features where their screens can all be read aloud to them. Okay, I see we've got some smiley faces in here and some sad faces. Excellent. Thank you guys for participating. I really appreciate it. Now, one of the things you guys did talk about was if they have printed materials and they need it read aloud. If the student has a Windows 10 compatible device or a tablet or a iPad or iPhone, they could use, and I'm going to put it in the chat pod presentation, a Microsoft Lens app. Okay, and what that does is it takes a photo of the printed text on the page, and it uses ocular character recognition, or OCR, and it will scan the page and then read that page aloud to the student. You can change the speed, the voice, highlighting, syllables, all sorts of stuff like that. And it uses a software that is called Immersive Reader. So give me either the penguin or a smiley face or a polar bear for a sad face. And let me know if you've heard of a Microsoft Lens or Immersive Reader. All right, so we say that we are Chromebook district limits us from some of this, right? There are still, if you have a Microsoft 365 license, there's a lot of things that you can do. And depending on which Chromebook you have, I can tell you if you can get something similar to it. Just let me know. Same thing with Google Schools. There are other resources out there. It's just Microsoft Lens is usually the one that works on most, but I see that we're getting Chromebook a lot, and that's okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you how Immersive Reader works in a Microsoft product. So you can see from this document that I've pulled up that it's a structured format. It looks like a checklist. And if I need this read aloud, it might be a little bit difficult for an ocular character recognition to use it if it's using that artificial intelligence. But since I've set it up in a Word document that doesn't have to use that and can just read the words that have been typed, you can go to View, click on Immersive Reader. So View, Immersive Reader. And now it makes it so that it's digestible, so it can read it aloud to me. And it has controls over here. And it highlights the words as it speaks. You can adjust the reading speed as well as the voice selection. You can also have it do a line focus, where it just reads one line at a time. This way the students can concentrate if they need to try to read it themselves. You can also change the page color. Whoops, line focus one more time, none, there we go. So if you have a student who has a vision impairment and they need that yellow background to really make the colors pop for them. You can have it break it up by syllables. And you can see that I've done all these different things to the text, but when I close Immersive Reader, nothing's happened to my document. It keeps it in its original format. And that's available in Outlook, in Word, and I want to say Sway, and then anything else that Microsoft has purchased recently, like Flipgrid, which we're going to talk about in a moment. All right, I'm going to pull the presentation back up. Whoopsies, it decided to make up its own mind today. That is okay. I appreciate your patience. As I mentioned at the beginning, for those of us who are just joining, this is my first time doing a professional development in Teams, so I appreciate the grace. And if anything doesn't make sense of what I'm referring to, please let me know. All right, Screencast-O-Matic recording. So someone had mentioned that they need to have oral presentation for their students of some of the test items. So I don't know how many of you guys have been in education for some time, but I used to, when I was in the classroom, get seniors or juniors who needed their volunteer hours for graduation to come to my classroom and read test items and read books to me, and I would record them so that I had them for the students. We could do the same thing with Screencast-O-Matic. So you can have the assessment pulled up that they need the questions written for, read to them for, and you can read the questions while they can still see the questions as well, and they can play it as many times as they need to. They don't have to keep asking you over and over again to please read that question again. The same thing can be done with a PowerPoint narration. So say I wanted to narrate on this particular presentation. I would go to recording, and then I would click record slideshow. And then if I had the questions on each slide, I could talk over them, and the student could watch it as many times as they need to. And then, of course, we have Flipgrid. Give me a penguin or a happy face if you've heard of Flipgrid before, and then give me a polar bear or a sad face if you have not heard of Flipgrid before. We got some smiley faces. Ooh, okay. Now, here comes the fun part. Has anybody used it before in the crowd today? I'm seeing lots of smileys, which is good, which means you've heard of it. So you could have a test question that you need to have read aloud to a student, and you could make a Flipgrid of it, and you could send it to them. They could answer you back in it as well. You can have the students, if you make this a response accommodations, the student can record themselves answering and send it back to you. Microsoft owns it, so if you're a Microsoft 365 district, it has that nice reciprocity. It also has that immersive reader in it, which let me make sure that I'm actually presenting so that you don't see the slide view. My goodness, this has a mind of its own. I'm going to just show it this way. And if anybody is unable to see it, please let me know. All right, this way I can switch back and forth. All right. So in Immersive Reader, one of the things I did not show you, because it is only available in OneNote with Immersive Reader, is that it also can color code the words and have a visual dictionary, which can be a really wonderful accommodation for our students. Screencast-O-Matic, as I referred to, that's where you can do that screen overview. Flipgrid, you can have that video question, the students can respond. It's also a great way of bridging the in-class students to the at-home students because they can watch each other's videos back and forth. All right, so back to a new resource. Smiley face or a penguin, if you've heard of it before. Sad face or a polar bear. Audiobook solutions, Learning Ally and Bookshare. Anybody heard of it? Anybody not heard of it? Anybody use it? Seeing lots of sad faces. We got a happy face for Learning Ally. Awesome. You've heard of different ones. Okay. All right, so it's kind of more leaning towards we haven't heard of this one before. So both of these resources are completely free to students who have IEPs, who have a documented need to have test questions or content read aloud to them. So if you have documentation that a student can do better when something is read aloud to them and they have an IEP, they can use either Learning Ally or Bookshare. Now, if you have a student who has who doesn't have an IEP or a 504 plan, but they have shown that they do better when something is read aloud to them. So it could be even a tier 1 student. Say you have that second grader who's gifted, but their reading hasn't caught up to their ability to process, and they can process things better when somebody reads it to them. They also qualify for a Learning Ally. It's completely free. Both of these are through the state. And every county has at least 7 digital rights manager. And I'm going to put that into the chat pod, a digital rights manager. Contact your building's LEA. So whoever comes to the IEP meetings and signs off on your IEPs, that person will know who the digital rights manager is for your building, and you can get access to it. With Learning Ally, it is human read by volunteers. So for example, even Wonder is read by like a 12-year-old boy. So it actually sounds like the narrator. There are over 800,000 books in Learning Ally. Any book a kid could want to read is in there. Some of it has a classic audiobook where it's just the audio. Some of it has narrated text as well. And it's really wonderful as a great equalizer for our students. So I highly encourage you, if you've not heard of these resources before, to reach out to the LEA in your building to find out who your digital rights manager is so that you can get access to it, because it is fantastic. And you can check out as many books as you like. So they no longer have to wait for a book to come into the library in a digital audiobook format. They now have the availability to have it whenever. You can manage their shelves. Students can pick their own books out, and it's just fantastic. All right, so someone mentioned having to clarify or rephrase things. This is where videos of instructions can really come in handy. No longer will you be asked 100 times how to do something or what I'm supposed to do. If you have it on a video, you can direct them to do that. Go ahead and watch it. You can make a screencast of how to complete something. You can make a voice audio recording and send it to the student as well. So those students who are getting that paper only and maybe don't have the ability to have that other device that can download Microsoft Lens, if they can access digital recording files, and you can send it to them and they can play it off their phone if their parents have a smartphone. Having how-to guides with visual image support, so taking pictures step by step of how they're supposed to get something done. And then one I don't see used very often, but I found to be very helpful, are quality examples of what is expected. For many students, they have difficulty kind of picturing what it is in your mind is a quality submission for work. So providing them with an example of what is expected can really be a great scaffolded strategy for providing those instructions or directions to them. Somebody also brought up having advanced organizers or notes. You can provide them with the slide decks ahead of time. So I could have emailed this out to you. If I had any notes, I could put it into the outline view so you could be able to see all of it. Or you can have another student outline it based on what you've talked about previously from previous years if you have that. Verbal encouragement. So we know that our students may or may not be on that digital call all day with us, or maybe they can't be on it at all because they're having the paper only versions of things, but they have verbal encouragement written as a accommodation on their IEP or their 504 plan. You can take videos and send it to them, pull out your phone, take a quick little video of encouragement, positive email, text, or voice notes. Share strategies with parents or caregivers of what works in the classroom. Now, some of you likely have new students this year, and you might have to contact the teacher from previous years to find out what works best with the student, or maybe their case manager if you are not their ESE teacher. Likely they've had a teacher that they've had contact with before. So kind of find out what works well for them and make sure that the parents and the people who are working with that student at home know some different strategies. All right, everybody's favorite question. or favorite accommodation to talk about is additional time. So for my friends that are out there today participating who have students who are currently in virtual learning environments, how are you working with additional time? Feel free to raise your hand or to type in the chat pod if you have any students who currently have additional time. And it could even be it's not working well. You know, we're at a safe place. Building it into instructional time, okay? Not working well. Thank you for being honest, Angela. Additional time does not mean an additional term. Thank you, Christy. Anyone else tried it out yet? Okay, so at the beginning, we talked about how an accommodation should be a direct reflection of the effect of the disability. And that is super present and super important when we're talking about additional time. So you really need to think about why is it that that student needs additional time and how much additional time do they truly need in order to be successful? So for example, when I was in college, since I had to work the entire time to support myself, I only took a couple of classes a semester because I really needed that amount of time to be able to get something done. But then once I kind of got used to it, I could pick up more classes with that. And so for me, the extended time I needed for myself was less subject areas to take. For our students with attention challenges that have difficulty focusing for long periods of time, talking to them about what they can focus on, how long, the breaks they need, things like that. What we see in the chat right now is it seems to be that scheduling the additional time is what the challenge is right now. And it's the same thing that we see in the classroom. So be really looking at your schedule after you figure out how much time the student does truly need in order to be successful. And then trying to look at your schedule and the student's schedule to see, do you need to be there to support that additional time? What is it that you're trying to measure during that assignment? Do you actually need to be there or not? Is it something the student can do on their own? So whenever you give an assignment out, to check for any timing settings. So some of the student schools have been using like IXL and they have to do speed drills. Well, speed drills are not always appropriate for every student. So really look to check and see if there's time settings. As we discussed, look at scheduling demands. This also comes out when you need to think about what time of day you're going to be asking for something to be submitted. This also takes a whole another level now when they're at home. What else do they have going on at home when they need that additional time? Really talking to them about it. So Heidi shares in the chat that scheduling is a struggle. I find that some of my students do not use it online because they're distracted by other things that are going on at home and their grades are reflecting this. And I think that's something that's really huge to bring up to the caregiver at home with them, to really have that dedicated space for learning. And it could even be suggesting that maybe they get, you know, giant headphones and make sure the kid's facing a wall so that they could really hone in. For some kids, that's just too overwhelming for them to be in that confined space, and maybe that's not going to be the greatest setup for them. But really looking at the environment that they're in becomes a whole new ballgame when we're looking at virtual settings. Okay. And the most important thing when we talk about additional time, the additional time is for them to be able to strive towards mastery. It's not double time. It's not till the end of the day. It's really what time they need in order to be successful. All right, checklists. So we're going to talk about some different apps for checklists. Give me a penguin or a smiley face if you've heard of Google Keep, sad face, or a polar bear if you have not heard of Google Keep before. We got a sad face, a happy face. Anybody use it? Okay, we've got somebody who's heard of it but hasn't used it before. Christy, I like that. It's a smiley face and a laughing face. Okay, so I'm going to let you into my world a little bit and show you how I use Google Keep. And what's really cool, if you're logged into your browser and you've used it before, you just have to type the word keep into your URL bar and hit enter. My tab list was too much for you, Andrea. That's okay. I completely understand. So this is my Google Keep. And I have it organized with pictures that I put on top, and with the exception of the red one, I haven't made a picture for that yet. But it kind of is my one-stop shop for what I need to work on. And I've put it out into categories. So I've seen teachers put this by class. I've seen teachers set it up where the student has it by different days. Ooh, Heather, I'm excited that you're into this because I'm super into this. You can pull it up on your phone too. You can set up a widget shortcut if you're using iOS. Anything past iOS, I believe 12 has widgets. So you can quickly type things out. You can also set it up as a location. So if you have a student who is transitioning back from virtual, or even in your current physical classroom, and they move about the campus, you can set up geotagging where the student will get a notification on their phone from Google Keep of what they're supposed to do when they get to that classroom. And I just think that that's amazing. Could you imagine, especially for our high schoolers who do not want to lose that social currency of, oh, I have to go ask the teacher what I'm supposed to do here, or, oh man, here's my like paper checklist that's in the front of my binder that all of my friends are like, what are you looking at? As opposed to, oh, I got a notification on my phone. No big deal. You can set it up with timers. You can have it with tags. So before COVID, I got to go to lots of fun conferences, and I tagged out all of my notes. It's just really quite fantastic. I'm a kind of person that has a pretty good memory, but I don't always have a great job with executive functioning of what I'm supposed to do and when, and this really helps me to organize the information. So Edward asks, could we do these and send them? Absolutely. So you can share them. So say I was working on my website with someone and I want to share this particular Keep note with them. I would add a collaborator here at the bottom. And I could say, my friend Susan, we work together a lot and I want to share that with her. And then I just hit save. And now that'll show up on Susan's board as well. So you can set them up for the students and share it with them as well. At the bottom here, you can do a remind me. You can change the color, the picture on top. You can archive it. It's also really awesome if the student is out there doing research or trying to take notes and remembering something, they come back into the classroom and they want to put it into a Google Doc to send to you all of their research. When you open up a new Google Doc, you see here on the side, you have some friendly widgets. If you go to the Keep button, all of my keeps will load here, and then I can drag it into the document, and now I get a nice bulleted list now in a document that I could share with you. Edward, I've never integrated it into Google Classroom before, but I would be interested to see what that would look like. Keep typing if you have any thoughts of what you would want it to do, or if it was just a general question. All right. The Notes app on the phone can also be great, especially it's no additional hardware. It's nice and quick. It also has the ability to scan documents in. Andrea asks, is there an app for Google Keep? Absolutely, I have one on my phone, which actually, let me bring it up very quickly. Since you can see my face, you will be able to see my phone as well. So I have my phone in dark mode, so the colors are a little bit different, but here it is on my phone. And that's what I was saying, that you can have it be a geotag or a reminder, and now it just becomes a notification for the student as opposed to, you know, something the teacher's bugging them about. If they have an Apple Watch too, they get the ding on the watch. It's very age appropriate. I love it. And then of course you can just do bulleting in Google Docs or Word, creating a checklist. And then back to Google Keep, I see we have a question. Do the students need the app to have the notifications? So to get it to go onto their phone, that's when they're going to need the app. If they have it open on the browser, it will also give you a notification if you have notifications turned on. But the student would need to download the app. Excellent question. Excellent idea. Edward shared that he thought he could use it as a weekly checklist for students. I think that's a great idea. Oh, Andrea couldn't see my phone. I'm so sorry. I'm not always sure if you guys could see my my face or not, so I do apologize for that. All right, so here's a screenshot of what my Google Keep used to look like before I added some things to it. That this is back in March, so I've gotten a lot more things to do, which is totally fine. Visual supports. I highly suggest for all ages, do not sleep on visual supports, because at our secondary level, this could even mean like what I was talking about earlier, where you have screenshots of you do this first, you do this first, you do this first. That is a visual support as well. Make sure that whatever digital copies were in use in previous years, you're figuring out what that would look like in this new environment. Providing an information sheet to the caregiver or the family of that student to teach them how to use the visual supports at home will also be really helpful. And make sure that whatever version you're giving to the families, that you can edit it, because as I'm sure that you've noticed by now, we've been in this mode for over a month. Things change all the time. And so we want to make sure that the families have that power to change those visual supports as they're needed. So Angela has another question about Google Keep, not a problem. If they use tablets and have the Google Mail app, would the notifications go through that? Yes, if that Mail app is tied to the Google account that the Keep is tied to. Excellent question, and great idea to get around it for that student that won't download it. Timelines. Timelines are so important in virtual learning. Timelines that are descriptive, that have step-by-step instructions for each of the steps. So it's not just that checklist, but taking it even a step further and explaining what each check mark means on the checklist. Providing examples, visuals, they'll be really important for you. A peer note taker. So if you are having any lectures that are in person and virtual, you can utilize the same peer that's been used in years past. If you have access to that student, you can always provide advanced notes. And then if you have the Microsoft Translator add-on for Microsoft PowerPoint and you have it subtitle the whole time you're speaking, it will type out a transcript and you can send that transcript to the student and the computer becomes the peer note taker. So if anybody is interested in Microsoft Translator, send me an email. I'm going to type it into the chat pod. It's a little bit complex. It's not difficult. There's just lots of steps. And if it's not something that you would find useful, I don't want to spend time on it right now. So if you have any questions about it, please let me know. All right, so back to our emojis again. So smiley face or a penguin, if you've heard of it before. Sad face or a polar bear, if you have not. Visor for Chrome. This is going to help with visual tracking while reading. Okay, we got some sad faces, sad faces. Excellent. All right, liner for Chrome. Sad, sad. This is the only time I think I miss Adobe Connect because the sad faces are very sad. I do miss the red X. All right, and then have you heard of Immersive Reader before? Hint, hint. Yes, you have. We talked about it. So have you heard of Immersive Reader? Happy face or a sad face? Awesome. So I showed you an Immersive Reader before that you can have it set up where you have just that one line and you can move it to different sizes and help with tracking there. But with Visor, for our Chrome users out there, if you have a student who is reading off a website, this is a Google Chrome extension that you can have it break down to the one line, to several lines, different colors, but it's fully available in Google Chrome. It's also available on Microsoft Edge for anybody who wants to use it on there as well. It's actually a built-in feature in Microsoft Edge, the web browser. Liner takes it to a different level. It allows the student to track. So if you're trying to teach the student to track while they read, it's a highlighter. And then for our secondary students or our older elementary even, if they need to do research, you can color code on different pages as you go, and then it will pull all of the highlighting out into a document and it cites it for you. This was a lifesaver during my master's program. It pulls out all the information. You can color code by topic, by idea, and then it pulls it out, organizes it for you, and it cites it for you. So for our younger kids who still need to track, It's great for highlighting. And then for our older kids who may need to color code things or pull out for research, it can also be used for that. So Immersive Reader, again, that's built into our Microsoft products. It's also built into the web-based Microsoft products where it will read and have that tracking in there as well. All right, so let's get our emoji fingers ready to go. Happy face, if you've heard of it before. Sad face, if you have not. A math dictionary for kids. Now, we do get that red squiggly line there because it is a British word, but it is not misspelled. It is actually what the company calls it. All right, so we had one smiley face. Rebecca, have you used it before? Now, since it is an international site, we are not able to access it on my current internet, but it should be unblocked at your school. I know when I was in a district, that was not a problem. It's just kind of our policy here at NEFAC to cut off any international sites. Oh no, you're fine, Rebecca. I was just checking in. No worries. But what it does is it provides a written definition of a math term, a very concrete version or visual version of a math term. Then it moves to that more representative into that abstract is kind of how they try to go with it. And it gives examples of what it would look like. So it breaks it down into really simple, understandable terms, and it has everything from K to 12. Now, I will warn you, the graphics on it are a little bit juvenile. So some of our secondary kids, if you just sent them to the website to look a word up on their own, they might be like, really, why are you sending me here? But you could always do what I did and take a screenshot of the vocab word, and then they don't have to worry about all the extraneous stuff on the page that might be like, really, miss, you sent me here? This is for 5-year-olds. But then when they look at the content, they're like, oh, wait, no, it's not. It just kind of looks like it is. So for older kids, I recommend that if you have a kid that will give you some pushback, take a screenshot. Little Explorers from Enchanted Learning is another place for dictionaries for elementary students. Merriam-Webster Word Central is for our upper elementary students, but it also provides, in both of those contexts, visual dictionaries, which are really helpful for our students. For our older students, the Merriam-Webster Visual Dictionary Online is an extremely age-appropriate for secondary resource. It really does not look juvenile at all, but it provides the supports that could be necessary. Now, you can see here it says Adobe Flash Player is blocked. So I'm hoping that they are updating some of these things before Adobe doesn't work anymore. Adobe Flash doesn't work anymore. So, but as of right now, unfortunately, you do need Flash to be able to get to some of the stuff. But as you can see, here's a visual dictionary for a plant cell, and it models it out. It has all the labeling, and it does not look for little kids. Now, of course, unfortunately, you have all the ads on the side, but there are apps I can show you that would get rid of the ads if you are concerned about that for some of our students. Visio words is one of my favorite ways to understand shades of meaning. So you can type in a word. So for example, for here, I typed in the word materialize, and it gave me all different shades of meaning and understanding, synonyms, antonyms, and it put it into a nice graphic organizer. And that's Visio words. And you can just a website, nice and free, all set to go. All right, choice boards. So we often see sometimes that students may have alternative assignment options, and we don't always know what that might be. On top of that, context is huge when it comes to providing alternative assignments. So for example, growing up, I did much better in social studies than I did in science. So if I had an accommodation of having a different way of showing what I knew in those courses, they would probably look different based on my own confidence level. So kind of keep that in mind as well. And one of the ways that you can do that without actually knowing the student very well is through a choice board where they get to pick what they do to show you what they know. So give me a smiley face if you've ever used a choice board in your classroom before, and give me a sad face if you have not. All right, so for those of you who have used choice boards before, what have you used it for? And what have you seen? Good things, bad things, in between? What are you thinking? Okay, different choices for paper. Okay. Absolutely, different ways a student can show you what they know with vocabulary and spelling is huge. So in this particular example that I'm sharing with you, it is a choice board that requires a tic-tac-toe. So if you have something that you want to make sure all of the students absolutely have to do or absolutely have to read to keep them all on the same page, you can have that be your center star. And then they have to pick something that's blue and they have to pick something that's yellow to make a full tic-tac-toe. Just tell them it has to go through number 5. In the example I have here from Casey Bell, who is awesome for Google resources, if you're not familiar with her already, for those of you who are Google districts. In this case, she has it where you start here, you watch the video in number 5, and then the blue is how you're going to learn the information, and then the yellow is how you're going to show what you know. So Tim shared that his kids loved it to have a say in what they got to do. I 100% agree. The more that we can put our students up and kind of prop them up, push them up so that they can become more expert learners and really take ownership of the learning, the more they're going to get out of your class, but even the more they're going to become college and career ready. So Heidi shares that the students all have different interests and talents, and some like to draw, others do not enjoy it at all. They love to be able to choose. Absolutely. Let them have that autonomy, and they'll surprise you. Sometimes they'll pick the thing that you thought they could not handle at all, and they will blow it out of the water. All right, so some participation again. Smiley face if you've heard of it, sad face if you have not. The National Library of Virtual Manipulatives. All right, so the National Library of Virtual Manipulatives is from Utah State University. You do need Java in order to run it, so you would need to download that, but it is free. And it has manipulatives that can be used online for math instruction and for math practice from pre-K all the way up to 12th grade in all of our big ideas for math. Just click on the picture of the matrix that you want to look at in regard to the big idea and the grade level, and it will show you some different manipulatives that you can use for that particular subject area. All right, smiley face if you've heard of it, sad face if you have not. Math Learning Center apps. Math Learning Center. Heather, love these. Can you share? You can either get on the mic or type in the chat pod if you want to share about how you use them.
Sure, Shannon. I've actually used it. I'm actually an instructional coach, so I've used them even in some of my virtual trainings to show how they can be used online. As far as we're interacting and showing their math thinking that way, and then discussions on how they could use it with their students. And I've had, I think, one of my virtual teachers said the 10 frame one was very cool. I actually think I learned about that from Jake in one of the trainings ever in May or April, somewhere back then. That it's been really nice as an option to have. And letting my brick and mortar teachers know too, it's still great to project on their screen too if social distancing is an issue or not sharing manipulatives.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you brought up that you could use it in the classroom as well, because that was my first thought. I started using these when I was in the classroom because we couldn't share manipulatives just because by the population of students in my classroom, a lot of stuff went into the mouth and we were just not getting germs around the room. I can only imagine what it would be like today. But it's just, I just think it's fantastic. So she shared the number frames, the 10 frame that Jake had shared. And also, I'm sure Jake is here today, so I'm sure he's very excited to hear that you use it, because trust me, when you train on technology, there's nothing more exciting than somebody telling you that, oh, I use that. That's who I learned it from, because it just makes us very, very happy. It's very easy to manipulate. The student can show their work. They can take screenshots. If you have them do screencasting, they can talk over the video to show you what they know. You can talk over the video to teach the concept. So if you need to do some reteaching or some pre-teaching, you can use a screencast, and you can use these resources in order to teach the math concepts as if you had had the manipulatives right in front of you with the student. So, and then if you guys have access to Teams, and you can do that with your students, they can take control of your device and they can move it around. And so it becomes as if those manipulatives are shared between the two of you or small groups. Jake shares that they are expanding sharing capabilities too. Many of them have a feature where the URL can be generated specific to what the current screen is. That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Jake. I was not aware of that. Next to the I at the bottom. Awesome. Let me, I at the bottom. Let's see. Ooh.
It's the icon next to the eye.
That's what you meant by next to. Don't actually click on the eye, you mean? Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to share about these particular apps? I don't spend a lot of time in math here, but since I have you here, I'd love to put you on the spot. Any other great resources you know about?
I think this is really one of the best free ones. There's a handful of them that were free during the beginning of the pandemic, but then started charging. But this one is still free and it's great. And they've, I want to say there's 7 or 8 of the apps that have that share feature. So students can actually share just a URL and they don't have to go through the extra step of taking a screenshot and finding a way to submit that screenshot, which can be another barrier that really has nothing to do with understanding, but may prevent them from sharing their thinking.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you brought that part of it up. Whenever we talk about technology, we really need to look at cognitive load. And we want the cognitive load spent on the activity and what they're supposed to get out of the activity, the objective, rather than the technology itself. So that takes some of the cognitive load off. We don't have to teach that extra step. So as Jake was sharing, that in the orange here above each of the apps listed on the page, you'll see that it says support sharing, which is awesome. Super excited about that. All right, calculators are a huge accommodation. We see it quite often, especially as the kids get older. This is my personal favorite one. I distinctly remember growing up and the teachers always telling me that you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket. You better remember how to do specific times tables or specific math. Well, joke is on them. I have a calculator in my pocket every single day. So they're built into our students' devices, and then you can always use the online graphing calculator, which is actually one of the topics of the upcoming Tech Tuesday. So if you are teaching upper level math and you need to have an online graphing calculator, please join us for the Desmos graphing calculator Tech Tuesdays, because I think it's really awesome and would have been fantastic when I needed a graphing calculator. I also think that it is a great equalizer for our students who come from lower economic brackets that can't afford the graphing calculator and maybe have to borrow one from the school, and it's not necessarily the best one. Or the school doesn't have any and they have to borrow it from a friend from a different period. And there's just a lot of social costs that comes from that. So I think that this is an excellent resource. And you are welcome, Jake. I saw that it was on the training list and was very excited because I feel like that's something a lot of teachers do not know about. Poor handwriting. For our students who an effect of their disability is poor handwriting, the number one thing I would love to tell you about are keyboarding skills and speech to text. It is never too young to teach keyboarding, in my opinion, and teaching them how to dictate using a computer software will save you all headaches. So in the chat, give me a smiley face if you've ever had to be a proctor for the 4th grade or any other grade level writing where the student had to dictate to you. So give me a smiley face if you've ever had to be the proctor for dictation. For those of you that have, I'm sure you would agree with me. It is painful, not only for you, but for the student. The protocols that are required to teach dictation for those statewide assessments, it's rough. I'm going to be honest. And it's to no one's fault. It's just what's put in place so that, you know, the accommodation is truly accommodation. But when we have keyboarding or we have speech to text as appropriate accommodations for these students, that extra load is taken off and they can really focus on their written expression. So give me a smiley face if you know how to turn on speech to text in your Google Doc. Give me a sad face if you do not know how to turn on speech to text in Google Docs. Okay, we got a bit of a mixed bag. All right, so let me show you. So we have our untitled document from before. But now I don't want to type it anymore. I'm going to hit Tools, Voice Typing, click to speak, and it will start listening to me, and it will start typing. I don't know why I decided to strike it out, but normally it does not do that. My computer has a mind of its own today, but that's okay. But it's just as simple as that. Tools, voice typing, turn the microphone on and it can hear you. All right, who knows how to turn on the voice typing in Microsoft? Give me a smiley face if you know how to do it in Word. Give me a sad face. Heather, I have not, but if you want to jump on the mic and talk about it, I always love new apps and ideas that are working.
Now or later?
Right now, go ahead. It's a small group, we're good.
Chromebooks here, one of the things I had stumbled upon, actually, the joy of social media, was a talk and comment. A bunch of teachers I follow extension, and I played with it. And as long as your students have it installed and you have it installed, we're able to record little snippets audio, and it embeds them as a link with a play button. So I've showed some teachers, and we even have one of our kindergarten teachers right now in our distance learning that is using some of her comprehension assessments, vocabulary things, where she's recording her voice reading the question and the answer choices, so that if they don't have an adult right there by them at home that can do that every single time they need it, they're even using that in Google Forms and things. And students can also use that reply back, and I have we brainstormed ideas even to where you could use that in a Google Doc comment to provide verbal feedback to students instead of having to type everything out. They could see you saying it, which was pretty cool too.
That is awesome, because that was something that was huge with Kami. For those of you who may not be familiar with Kami, Kami is a PDF annotations extension and app. And the paid version has exactly what Heather was talking about. And to me, that's what makes the paid version worth it. But if there's a free way, which she just shared with all of us, and I'm going to put in the chat pod, that is awesome. And especially for our kinders. And also think about how much independence that could build with our students, that they don't have to sit and wait for us to read it to them. They don't have to feel bad about asking you to read it again when there's 3 other kids in the room. They could read it again on their own, and it's there for them. Oh, that makes me so excited. Okay, Angela, do Chrome extensions work for iPads? Unfortunately, they do not. There may be some apps out there that are similar. However, I don't think I've seen anything this robust, but you can, in Notes, share a note with a video and with audio tags on them. So that would, I think, would be the closest thing to it in an iOS device. And if anyone has any other thoughts, please share. All right, so speech to text in Microsoft is just referred to as dictate. And you might have to add it to your ribbon bar for dictate. but I have it added, and you just click the little microphone button. It's listening to me, and it's trying to type. It's doing a pretty good job. It's just weirdly formatting itself because of how I have the document formatted. Let's see. Oh, okay. It did catch that I said that correctly. I thought it was going to say fermentation or something. But you can see it's pretty accurate. And like I said, the only reason it's typing like this is because of the formatting of the document. It does not normally do that. And I'm going to hit the microphone again, and it turns it off. All right, closed captioning. Now, if you have a student that it says on their IEP or their Section 504 plan that they need closed captioning, it must be from a live human captioner. You cannot use the artificial intelligence captioning that's built into a lot of the products that we use that I'll show you in just a second. If they absolutely need it, you must use something called a CART service. And if you have a student that needs that, your local itinerant teacher for the deaf of hard of hearing or the caseworker for the deaf of hard of hearing will know about how to get them CART, especially if they've had it in the past. But give me a smiley face if you know how to do closed captioning in Google Slides, and then give me a sad face if you do not. All right, we got a little bit of a mixed bag, but mostly people do not know. Awesome, so let me show you. I'm just going to open a Google Slides presentation. And this is a little preview of a session that I'm doing at the end of the month. And I'm going to hit present. And once present loads, I'll be able to see the closed caption button pop up here, the CC button. And then I could also pick the size of the captioning as well as the position. So I want this to be on top. And so it's going to listen to me, and you can see that it is providing live captions up there. However, it is not always correct. I'm a person that speaks very quickly if you have not caught on to that today. And if I get really excited about something, I talk about things even more quickly. So you get me talking about technology, and this thing cannot keep up with me. It is getting better and better every day. This has been a feature for a little over 2 years now, and it is amazing what it can do now compared to 2 years ago. All right, so then give me a smiley face or a sad face if you know how to do it in PowerPoint. How to get those captions in PowerPoint. Okay, Denise again knows how to do it. Awesome job, Denise. Super excited. So you go to slideshow here up at the top. Click always use subtitles. So they're referred to as subtitles in Microsoft. And then you start your slideshow. And of course it switched screens on me again, but that's all right. We're going to get through this together. There we go. And you can see that I have it up at the top again. If I pause too long, it automatically gives it a period, which is another thing that may mess some kids up, and another reason why CART services are necessary. But this can really help for your student who maybe has some attention challenges and has no idea what the last 3 words that came out of your mouth were, but they can look up on the screen and know what you said. Also, our students who are English language learners, this provides the word up on the screen while they're hearing them as well. I'm also a person that watches television with the closed captioning on all the time because I have a tendency to space out a little bit sometimes, and it helps me to come back in. Or I may not understand the accents, and so it can be super helpful. All right. Is there anything like this for Notability or opposite annotation for Google Slides? Angela, if you have a mic available, would you like to clarify that a little bit for me? Or you can type it if you don't feel comfortable jumping on the mic. Go ahead, Angela.
Can you hear me?
I sure can. Thank you so much for getting on the mic.
this is my first time on Microsoft Teams, so.
Great job.
So Notability, if I teach remotely, I share my screen sometimes to show how to draw on a graph or something like that. And is there a way to either do the closed captioning while I'm sharing the screen in Notability, or opposite, where I could have a graph on a Google slide and annotate directly on that while there's closed captioning?
Let's try it. Let me pull this up and present. Now, and then the other thing is the iPad throws in a whole other aspect. We can do pointers, but it doesn't keep what we wrote. So it doesn't look like that's an option. But in Microsoft, I can draw on my slides and it does keep that. Let me switch my displays. So in Microsoft, oh, it's gonna not be my friend now, isn't it? Normally you have the toolbar and the toolbar is not popping up. Would we be able to draw on it? But you should be able to draw, but it looks like it's making it so that I can't get to the tools and caption at the same time. So it may be helpful to use something like Screencast-O-Matic, and then if you have the premium version, you can subtitle it, or rather close caption it for after the fact and send it to the student. But let me think on that. Put in my email in the chat, Angela, and just send me an email of like, hey, we want to try to figure this out, and we'll figure it out together. Because I'm sure there's got to be some workaround we can find. All right, so if a student requires magnification, you need to just make sure that you know it ahead of time and to what level. The documents need to be clear. So our scanned copies of PDFs are not the best. So if you can find the original typed version of something, their magnification is going to be even better. If they can be given it in a digital format, it takes it to a whole nother level, because then they could use that immersive reader and change what they need to change in order for their vision to work functionally without an extra device. For our students who are taking materials home with them, you can turn your phone into a magnifier in the accessibility settings. So this way that they have a handheld magnifier without spending $500 on a different device. All right, the preview of vocabulary or key points is an often used accommodation. Give me a smiley face if you've heard a Quizlet, or if you have not, give me a sad face. Awesome, so we have a lot of smiles. Would anybody like to share how they use Quizlet, if anybody's using it? You can type or you can jump on the mic. Okay, matching game, asteroid game, math vocab, flashcards, awesome. So it's a great review or preview of vocabulary points. It kind of gamifies things. You can also do a Kahoot. You can do a blind Kahoot. They can do it on their own time. Heidi uses Quizlet for vocabulary, and Quizlet Live's her favorite. Awesome. Heidi, do you want to tell us more about Quizlet Live?
Sure. Obviously, like online, it's a little more difficult, but in the classroom, typically they'll assign the kids to a group, and then the group will have all the vocab words. Well, the definitions divided up, and the vocab words, I guess it's the words that are divided up, and they'll show a definition at the top, and then the kids work collaboratively to decide what the correct definition is, because only one person in the group has that term on their screen to choose it, and all the groups are competing as a whole to win. And if anybody misses a word, then it takes them back to zero and they have to start over again trying to get to the end of the game. So it's really fun, and it encourages them to work together, and it's good for vocabulary review.
Awesome, thank you for sharing that. And you know, I think that takes it even to another level. Whenever we look at instructional technology, we want to think about how does it take what we could do in the classroom to a whole nother level. The self-correcting ability that takes them back down to zero that's when we really start to transform with technology. Those students would not be able to do that activity if the technology did not exist. If that self-correcting was not there, they could not play the games and they would not be as enticed to work together. They wouldn't have that gamified aspect. It's just another example of how tech can take things even further. So awesome. You can also share informational videos on the content with our virtual learners. You can have a student in the classroom make a video to share with your virtual learners as well, especially if you have an expert in your room. Awesome. So does anybody have a student that needs visual cues on assignments, like either where to start, visual cues for writing outlines, anything like that? All right, so I see that. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you guys for responding. Sometimes, especially when an adult's not there next to them, sometimes students have difficulty kind of knowing how to start or what to do at certain times. They don't always know what needs to be clued in on. You know, as educators, we have a tendency sometimes to really focus on or enunciate on different things so that students kind of get that clue of, oh, this is important. And that isn't always available in virtual instruction, especially if you're giving them assignments in something like Google Classroom or Canvas. So you want to make sure that you have an icon or an emoji key. If they have anything that they've used in the past, of course, you could always build on that. Try to use what's already built into Google or Microsoft, or using a free icon service so that it can be consistent. And then you can model it for the student by tagging a document or a reading according to that key you created. So whether it's the assignment or a reading passage that they need to do, make sure that you model for them ahead of time so they know how to use the strategy. And that basically goes also for any accommodation. You want to make sure you model so they understand how to use it. So in this example, anything that has that smiley face that's hugging, it's showing that it's kind of wraparound content. We've talked about it before. Anything that has that emoji that's kind of thinking is going to be some new information that I really want you to pay attention to. Anything that's yellow are vocabulary words. Anything that's blue is going to be, that's the topic I really want you to focus on, or that's the content that's really huge. Make sure you read that sentence. And then I had that smiley face with the thinking hand on it. And so that shows that not only is that very important from the blue, but I really want you to make sure that you're thinking about that. Edward uses bold and color, but never thought about an emoji key. Awesome. You know, I kind of also think about it. You could do, you know, the different reading strategies, especially if you're a content area teacher, where they kind of codify their paper, like, oh, this made me think of something. They have a connection. They draw, you know, little hands together. It's a connection to self, connection to the world. They draw a globe. If they have a question about something, they can put a question mark next to it and highlight. And the nice thing is that emojis don't freak the kids out. They're very used to using them and seeing them. And so now if we can encourage them to use things that they use every day, then it doesn't feel as overwhelming. It kind of becomes fun to use it as a reading strategy. All right, my favorite. I know I keep saying my favorite every time, but this is definitely one of my favorites. Behavior support. So this is something that's really difficult to do in an online setting. Number one, you want to have clear rules and expectations. You know, is the camera's on, camera's off, mic's on, mic's off. You know, do they need to participate in the chat? Is there a collaborative document? Anything like that. Also providing alternate activities and choices. Our students in virtual environment, we don't know what's going on at home. You know, one of you mentioned that sometimes it's really difficult for the students to pay attention because of everything that's going on. So maybe having that camera on and having the discussion is not the best way to show what they know right now. Maybe they need something else. And providing an opportunity for movement. So one of the ways you can do this in the online virtual setting is something as simple as asking a student to pick up an object they have on their desk. Okay, so we're going to try it together. So they have the object on their desk. For this example, it is my hand sanitizer that smells like watermelons. And I'm going to hold it in my hand and I'm going to stare at it. And then I'm going to do a neck roll. And then I'm going to do a stretch. Turn to the side, turn to the side. You can even have them get up and do a stretch. But it has that opportunity for movement because I've been sitting in this chair now for an hour and 17 minutes, if not longer than that. And you guys have been as well. And you might need an opportunity for movement. You know, if this was an in-person training, we would be up and about the whole time. And so it's very different. The same goes for our students. So having that structured opportunity for movement. So before I get into documentation ideas, what are some accommodations that you have in your classroom that we did not cover today that you would like to talk about? Because this is a nice small group, so I want to kind of give that opportunity. What are some accommodations that you've tried and it's just not working? Some different things that you are kind of on your mind, or maybe that you said at the beginning was a burning questions. Breakout rooms in Zoom and not working. Is it not working because the tech's not working or because the students aren't behaving themselves? The tech. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't know a ton about Zoom. It is a product that we are not able to use right now in my county. But there are some other ideas on how you can use breakouts. So I'm going to plug another session that the instructional department here at NEFECT has coming up on Jamboard. I think Jamboard is a really great substitute for doing breakouts so that they can all work collaboratively in an environment. And you might just have them have different Zoom rooms that they go into, and then they have that kind of collaboration space with using Jamboard. Jamboard's kind of like a an interactive whiteboard on steroids. But if the breakout rooms aren't working, I would suggest multiple Zoom rooms and you popping in and out of them. And then timing. What challenges are you having with timing?
Sorry, it might be easier to just talk.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
Sorry. The timing, like if they have a small group testing accommodation, jumping from room to room to help students, to rephrase a question, things like that. And then also getting them to join the room. And sometimes when the breakout rooms open, they constantly get kicked out. So it's like jumping back and forth constantly to the entrance, to the main room, to let them in, and then to go back into the breakout rooms back and forth. And then there's some classes have a large amount of IEP students, like 11.
Yeah.
Technically, that's a small group compared to the total amount.
But it's not really a
small group.
Not for what those kids might need. I completely understand that. So yeah, the tech issue, unfortunately, with Zoom, kicking them out and things like that, you might want to think about a different platform. Unfortunately, if you're locked into Zoom, I completely understand that. You know, maybe scheduling it slightly different, or talking to the teacher that's providing the assessment and say, hey, you know, this really doesn't translate to our students who need additional time. Is there another way we could test this particular topic or content with keeping the entire, but maybe something slightly different? Now, I know that some teachers are not going to be open to that, but that may be just, hey, explaining like, look, we're in a whole new world this year with this, you know, half online, half in person. Can we think about some other options that might be helpful? Especially since the tech is not something we can necessarily control. But send me an email if you continue to have that challenge, and we could work out based on what your individual district has kind of rules on. Denise shares, I have issues with students not using the accommodations that I give them. Example, text questions being read to them. Suggestions for that. Well, Denise, it really comes down to student autonomy, whether they want to use an accommodation or not. So if you are their teacher, which I would imagine you are, unless you're just their proctor, have a conversation with them about why they don't want it. What is the barrier? Do they not feel that they're benefiting from it, or is there some other function of that behavior? Is there some other reason that they're refusing that accommodation? Maybe they don't need it anymore, or maybe they're just frustrated with it and they're like, whatever, I'll just take the test and I'll fail, leave me alone. There could be a social cost with it, or it could be that they kind of want to do it on their own and they don't like that adult involved. And that's where you could have some of those resources we talked about where you can record yourself ahead of time using Screencast-O-Matic or what Heather shared, that commenting video tool back and forth, so that the student can control it on their own time, and it takes the onus off of you, but also lets the student have control over it and see if they prefer it that way. Also, if you give a series of questions in Microsoft Forms has Immersive Reader built in, and so they can have the computer read the test to them. And on Chromebooks, depending on how you set the test up, it could be read to them as well through the computer, and maybe they prefer that. Okay. So documentation ideas. Documentation is huge in the world of special education. So there's some different ideas on how you could do that. Of course, you could use your traditional spreadsheets and your lesson plan documentation as if they were in the classroom. But since our students are really becoming more independent through this virtual learning, I would love to take this opportunity to talk about maybe having the student monitor their own accommodation. So for example, with Denise, the student maybe is refusing a particular accommodation. Just document that and ask the student to document when they ask for the accommodation and they use it versus when they don't want to use it, and kind of keep track of that. And also look at having a conversation using that data with that student. You know, on the days where you don't ask for this accommodation and you don't want it, look at your test scores as in comparison to on the days where you are asking for it. Now, if there's no difference between the two, or the student actually does better without the accommodation, then it might be time to take it a step back. And you could always reconvene the IEP team to talk about those accommodations as well. You can use Google Forms or Microsoft Forms to keep track of things, and it puts it in a nice spreadsheet. So Angela asks, can we use Google Keep for something like that, self-monitoring, meaning it is secure? All of your Google stuff that's through school accounts are FERPA compliant, so you can use them. What I would suggest maybe would be to have a Keep that links to the form, because the form will then put it into a nice Google Sheet for you, and it will also have that built-in graphing ability. So when you're ready to have data chats at your IEP or your 504 meeting, you can say, like, this is how the student's using it, this is what's worked, what hasn't worked, and you have that nice data all available in one spot. So if you want to use Google Keep, I would suggest just linking to that specific form within your Google Keep. All right, so what questions do you still have? I know I kind of already touched on this before we talked about documentation, but do you have any other burning questions about virtual accommodations? You can type in the chat, or you can raise your hand and jump on the mic. All right, if you don't have any other questions, my question for you, which tools and or strategies are you going to try out tomorrow? What are you most excited about? Google Keep, awesome. That seems to be a big one today. You know what, Heather? The more that you use Google Keep, the more that you can show its students, or you can show other teachers exactly how to use it and what's helped. You know, I think that when we use technology ourselves and teach other people, that really becomes powerful, because especially for our students, they see like, oh wow, this is an adult that's like teaching me and seems to have it with it, and they have to use this, so it must be okay. Or something that everybody uses. So virtual manipulatives is another big one. A magnifier, awesome. Choice boards, cool, I love it. Yeah, I love to use choice boards whether the kid has an accommodation or not for alternative assignments, because as long as we keep that objective or that standard in mind of what it is we're truly assessing, I don't care how you show me that you know it. Okay, using the math library of virtual manipulatives, awesome. So what barriers do you think you might encounter trying these tools out with your students? What barriers do you think might pop up? Tech skills, okay. Motivation, absolutely. Getting the students excited about it. And the reason whenever I do a tech training, I talk about barriers is because I just want to be realistic. I'm the first one to tell other people how excited I am about technology, but maybe they've got barriers that I don't see. So I always like to just call out the elephant in the room. You know, what do you think might stop you? The time to teach them yet another thing. That is huge. So you really do need to be careful when picking out technology, especially with our students in virtual settings. We don't want to make it just another thing. So really think about, is this something that would truly help this student be able to fully participate and gain greater independence in this course? If not, it might not be the right time right now to bring it up with their kids. So really be selective about how you're going to teach it and is it truly necessary? Great point. All right. So questions, you can always email me. You have your local Fiddler's Associate Center. And as Marianne shared, all of our resources can be found on our website. So when you go to fiddlers.org, if you go to recorded webinars, you'll be able to see all of our parent webinars that we've done, as well as our educator webinars, where we have another recording of this. And then I know that Rhonda has recorded today's session as well. We have all different online courses that can be taken. So please make sure to check us out. Marianne also shared our virtual instruction resources. This is a database of resources that are from all different discretionary projects from the Bureau of Exceptional Student and Student Services. And this has a ton of more even resources that we've been collecting for the last 6 months. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Shannon. I don't know about everyone else, but I was like madly writing down all of these resources throughout our time together this afternoon. Several of us were on the call with her, and I know I learned a lot of things, and I hope that you have some things that you can take back as well. Again, thank you for joining us on our first Tech Tuesday that we started offering again in the fall. We will come back together next week. Next week, I believe, I have a blank right now, but you can look on the calendar. We do have, it will be from 3 to 5 if you haven't registered and you're interested. It's Nearpod. I knew it would come to me in a second. So we're going to have a session with Nearpod next Tuesday, and we'll actually have the Nearpod company sharing some of the free resources that you can use as a teacher. I do want to say real quick that for you to get in-service credit for today, we're going to ask that you attend at least 3 Tech Tuesdays, and then we'll prepare a Google form for you to share a product with us of how you've taken it back and used it in your classroom, so that you can share with us your implementation and also get those in-service points that you need. So thanks again for joining us. Please reach out to Shannon if you have additional questions. She was a wonderful resource today. So thank you. And thank you also to Marianne for allowing her to help us with this presentation. So have a great afternoon, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next week.